The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the tiny town of Bell, a place with more dust than dreams, where engines groaned louder than people, and the main attraction was a decades-old gas station with a rundown garage tucked beside it. That garage belonged to Rick Danner, a man with calloused hands, a quiet voice, and a past that clung to him like oil stains on his shirt. Rick had once dreamed of racing, had a shot, even, but life had its own plans. A wreck on the track and a family debt left him grounded, fixing pickups and tractors just to keep the lights on. He'd long since given up on things like love, or even luck, that is, until she rolled in. It was close to closing time when the rumble of a high-performance engine broke the silence. Not the usual coughing, wheezing kind he was used to. This was smoother, sharper, like the sound of speed in motion. Then came the sight, a sleek black motorcycle kicking up dust as it pulled to a stop right outside his garage. The rider pulled off her helmet, a woman, young, her hair wild from the wind, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She looked around, like she wasn't sure if she'd reached her destination, or just got tired of running. "Bike's overheating," she said flatly, voice a mix of command and exhaustion, "and I think the radiator's leaking." Rick wiped his hands on a rag and stepped forward. "That's not a bike you see around here. Custom Ducati." "Yeah," she said, glancing at the sunset. "I was headed west. Got lost." "West? About 2 hours back." Rick smirked. "You're headed toward nothing." She took off her glasses, and for a second, Rick was caught off guard. There was something about her eyes. Sharp, tired, lonely. "Well," she muttered, "maybe nothing is what I need." Rick didn't ask questions. He didn't trust people easily, and he sure didn't expect this mystery woman on an expensive bike to trust him either. But something in her tone told him she wasn't here by accident. "I can take a look," he offered. "Won't be fast. Parts for that thing aren't exactly stocked in Sandvale." "I'm in no rush," she replied. "Name's Jay." Rick paused. "Just Jay. No last name, no explanation." He nodded. Rick, that night, Jay, camped out in a small trailer beside the shop, said she liked her space, and Rick didn't argue. Over the next few days, he worked on the Ducati. It was more complex than anything he'd touched in months. Precision machinery built for someone who liked to ride fast and hard. Yet the wear on the bike said something else. She wasn't racing. She was running. Jay spent most of her time sitting outside, staring at the sky, nursing coffee, and saying little, but occasionally, she'd offer pieces of herself. "Ever feel like the world expects you to be someone you're not?" she asked one evening. Rick raised an eyebrow. "Sure, but the world usually gets over it once you stop trying." She chuckled. "That's simple, huh? Simple ain't easy." Days passed. The bike got closer to road ready, and Jay grew less guarded. She helped Rick with minor tasks, asked about old cars in the lot, even fixed a kid's broken bicycle chain. When he rode up crying, "You're good with machines," Rick said one morning. She looked down. "Machines are honest, people not always." Rick didn't push. But deep down, he knew she wasn't just any biker. There was something about the way she moved, like someone used to making decisions, used to being watched, but exhausted from pretending. He didn't need her full story to know that pain. Then came the night she opened up. They sat on the porch, sharing cheap coffee in silence. When she finally spoke, "I wasn't just headed west," she said. "I was trying to get away." From what? Jay took a deep breath. "From a life that doesn't feel like mine anymore." Rick waited. "My full name's Jayla Winters," she continued, her voice quieter now. "Winters Global. Maybe you've heard of it." Rick blinked. He had big tech, energy, aviation. Her last name was practically on satellites. "I'm supposed to take over soon," she added, "but every move I make is calculated by the board, the media, people I thought were friends. I couldn't breathe anymore, so I left everything, cut my cards, packed light, and rode out with no map." Rick didn't speak. He just nodded, as if he'd known all along. "I thought if I could just disappear," she whispered, "maybe I'd remember who I was before everything had a dollar sign attached." "You find her yet?" Rick asked gently. Jay looked at him. "I think I'm close." The next morning, she helped him finish the bike. The repairs were done. She could leave. But when she looked at the road, her eyes didn't light up like before. Something had shifted. "You don't belong here," Rick told her. "But maybe you needed to." She looked up at him. "You ever think about leaving?" "Used to," he said. "Then I figured it's not about the place. It's about the people." Jay stepped closer. "What if the right person shows up, but she's got a whole world chasing her?" "Then I'd fix her bike," Rick said, "and hope she figures out where she wants to go." Jay smiled softly. She didn't ride off that day. Jayla hadn't left yet. Rick could feel her presence even when she wasn't saying much, and that was fine with him. Her bike was ready to go, her helmet always nearby, yet each morning she found a reason to stay a little longer. Sometimes it was a faulty starter in an old Ford. Sometimes just the way the light hit the dusty yard at sunrise, and sometimes it was Rick. She started showing up earlier and earlier. What began as occasional help became routine. Rick didn't question it. She had a knack for engines, knew torque specs like second nature, and never minded grease under her fingernails. For someone so skilled, she worked like she was trying to forget who she used to be. Rick found himself watching her when she wasn't looking. The way she moved, calm but alert. The way she smiled, carefully, like it was something she was still learning to trust. There was something about Jay, something, half wild, half lost, like a woman who'd been running for a long time and didn't know how to stop. One afternoon, she was fixing up a transmission when she said quietly, "What would you do if you suddenly had enough money to never work again?" Rick didn't look up. "I'd still work." "Why?" He tightened a bolt. "Because this." He gestured around the garage. "Makes sense. You put something broken in front of you. You figure out what's wrong. You fix it. Not like the rest of life." Jay leaned back, wiping her hands on a rag. "Yeah, I used to think like that too, until the money started meaning more than the work. Then everything got cloudy." She didn't explain more, and Rick didn't push. But that night, he sat out on the porch longer than usual, staring at the stars and wondering just how broken a person had to feel before they hid their name and rode across the country on a bike they built themselves. 3 days later, the world caught up with her. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the garage lot, looking like it didn't belong on a dirt road. 2 men stepped out, suits, sunglasses, the whole corporate package. Rick walked out with a shop rag over his shoulder. "Can I help you?" he asked. One of the men, tall and clean-shaven, spoke. "We're looking for someone. Her name is Winters. She's been out of contact for weeks." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Never heard of her." The second man's eyes flicked toward the Ducati parked under the lean-to. "That bike's custom. We have records that match its frame to a private build owned by Ms. Winters." Jay stepped out from behind the garage, wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans, grease streaked across her arm. "It's okay, Rick." The men immediately straightened. "Miss Winters, we've been instructed to bring you back to New York." "Your father is." "I left," she said sharply. "On purpose. There's a shareholders' emergency. The board is unstable without you." Jay folded her arms. "That's not my problem anymore." One of them sighed. "Your absence has become one." She looked at Rick, then back at them. "Give me an hour." "That's not advised. Either you give me an hour or you wait until I'm back. Your call." Without another word, she turned and walked to her Ducati. Rick stared at her, unsure what to say. She strapped on her helmet and looked over at him. "You coming or not?" He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his gear and climbed on behind her. They rode hard through the hills and winding country roads, wind tearing through their hair. No destination, just escape. Rick had no idea where they were headed, but he knew exactly what she was doing, buying time, breathing, living before she was boxed back into a cage lined with gold. They stopped near an abandoned quarry. Jay climbed off the bike and stood at the edge, looking out at the emptiness below. "I built that company from the inside," she said. "Everyone thought I just inherited it, but I bled for it. Spent my 20s proving I wasn't some spoiled heiress. Then one day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore." Rick stayed quiet. "I left because I had everything, but I felt nothing. My name wasn't mine. My life wasn't mine." He finally spoke. "So you became Jay." She turned to him. "And then I met you." Rick's breath caught, just a little. "I'm just a guy with a wrench." She smiled, gently. "Yeah, but you never asked who I was before. You looked at me like I was enough." Rick stepped closer. "You are." They stood in silence, shadows stretching longer as the sun began to dip. Finally, she sighed. "I have to go back." "For now," Rick nodded. "Didn't expect you to stay forever. But I don't want forever to mean never again." He met her gaze. "Then don't let it." She reached out and touched his cheek, gently. "Do you ever need a partner for this place? Someone who knows engines and how to run billion-dollar meetings. I might be free soon." He smiled. "We'll save a stall for you." They rode back as the sky turned orange. The black SUV waited patiently. Jay didn't look scared anymore, just strong. Resolved, she turned to Rick before she got in. "I'll be back. And next time, I won't be running. I'll be building something that's mine." Rick nodded. "I'll be here." And with that, she was gone. But she hadn't taken the Ducati that told him everything he needed to know. Rick never liked silence, not the kind that lingered after someone left. The garage was still filled with clanks and humming engines, but something deeper had gone quiet. Jayla's Ducati sat in the corner, still draped with a dusty tarp, untouched. Since the day she'd ridden away in that black SUV, customers came and went, but Rick's eyes kept drifting back to the space she used to stand in, wrench in hand, laughing about his stubborn old sockets or making fun of his terrible country. Playlist. Weeks passed. No texts, no letters, no signs. Just the ache of unfinished words and the memory of her hand on his face. Then, one early morning, before he even unlocked the shop, he found a note taped to the garage door. The paper was folded neatly, pressed flat as if written with care. On the front, just 2 words in her unmistakable handwriting. "I'm back." She walked in 10 minutes later like she'd never left hair windswept. Smiles soft but sure. No guards or tinted windows behind her. She wasn't in disguise this time. No helmets or flannels to hide behind. She stood in front of him as Jay Winters, the billionaire, the biker, and something new herself. Rick stared for a second too long, wrench frozen in his hand. "You're late. I brought breakfast," she said, lifting a greasy brown paper bag, "and a full tank of truth, if you're still interested." He took the bag, nodded toward the workbench. "Start talking." They sat across from each other, engine parts scattered around them like half-finished thoughts. She unwrapped a sandwich but didn't eat. "I did it," she said. "Sold off half my stake in the company. Made enough noise to make the board stop seeing me as a product. I'm not out, not entirely, but I'm not chained to it anymore." Rick raised a brow. "That easy?" Jayla gave a half laugh. "It cost me more than most people will ever earn in 5 lifetimes. But you're free." She nodded slowly. "I am." They ate in silence for a while, the kind that felt more like comfort than distance. Then Jayla looked over at the Ducati. "She's still here. Didn't feel right touching her," Rick said. "She was never really mine." Jayla stood and pulled back the cover, running her fingers along the frame. "She always belonged to the road, like I thought I did, until I realized I don't want to keep running." Rick leaned against the bench. "So why come back?" She looked at him, eyes soft but clear. "Because this is the first place I ever felt real. I came here with a name I was hiding and found a man who looked right through it. You didn't fall in love with the Winters heiress. You saw Jay. You fixed more than engines, Rick." He tried to hold steady. "So, what now?" She hesitated, then pulled out a folded blueprint from her bag. She spread it across the table between them. It was a sketch of a new garage, modern yet cozy, with space for restoration, custom builds, and a little storefront. At the bottom, it read, "Sandvale Custom Garage, a Jay and Rick workshop." He blinked, stunned. "You want to go into business with me?" Jayla smiled. "I don't just want to build bikes, I want to build something that lasts, with someone who knows the difference between chrome and character." Rick ran a hand through his hair, heart pounding in a way he didn't know he still could. "You serious?" "Dead serious." He took a long breath, glancing at the plans. "That shop's too fancy for me. That's the point. I bring the polish. You bring the soul." "And what about us?" he asked, quieter now. She reached for his hand. "Rick, I didn't just come back for torque specs and toolboxes. I came back for you. I've had all the boardrooms, power lunches, and 5-star suites I can take. None of it meant a damn thing, until I was under a truck beside you, laughing at nothing." Rick stared at her, heart full of things he didn't know how to say. So he leaned forward and kissed her instead. Soft, real, grounded. When they finally pulled back, she whispered, "So that's a yes." "That's a hell yes." Months later, Sandville Custom Garage opened its doors with little fanfare but a lot of heart. Locals lined up with busted pickups, vintage Mustangs, and stories that needed listening to. Jayla traded her Blazer for a banana. Rick smiled more than he used to, and the Ducati finally got the long ride it deserved, this time with 2 riders who weren't running anymore. Together, they didn't just fix engines, they built a life.